This is India Global. I'm Gaurie Dwivedi. Let's get you the headlines this Monday evening. First up, Prime Minister Modi is all set to undertake his historic visit to Brunei and Singapore. Defence, trade, space and healthcare are likely to be the key focus areas during this historic visit. Shooting reported outside singer AP Dhillon's house in Canada. Gangster Lawrence Bishnoi claims responsibility for the attack. Reports suggest Turkey formally applies to join the BRICS grouping of nations, BRICS, to discuss expansion in its upcoming October visit scheduled for Russia in October. South African president visits Beijing, calls for balanced trade. Ramaphosa is set to narrow country's trade deficit with China. And it seems there's some respite coming in for the Pakistani economy. The annual inflation now slows down to 9.6% on the back of a $7 billion IMF bailout that Pakistan secured. All right, the big story that we are tracking right now on India Global, that is Prime Minister Modi's historic visit to Brunei, followed by Singapore. The visit comes at a time when India is pushing the pedal on its ASEAN outreach and its Act East policy. This comes also at a time when China has also been deepening its engagement and has had historically deep engagements with all of the 10 ASEAN countries. This is the first ever bilateral visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Brunei, where defence, trade, space and healthcare are set to be the key focus areas. Brunei is also a very crucial partner for India, as I said, in the Act East policy, and this upcoming visit scheduled from tomorrow is set to strengthen cooperation in all these existing sectors between the two countries. The discussions are likely to focus on cooperation also in newer sectors, and there is also semiconductors that could be a key area of convergence between the ASEAN countries, particularly Singapore and India. This also comes, the visit comes as India and Brunei mark 40 years of diplomatic ties, and while Prime Minister Modi will be at these two countries, he will also engage with the diaspora in both of these countries. This visit comes at a time when he is already engaged with the countries and heads of states of Vietnam and Malaysia, indicating that the government is pushing the pedal when it comes to all the ASEAN countries and sets the agenda for what lies ahead. All right, let's first get in a reaction from the Ministry of External Affairs. We come back and talk more on that.
As you know, Prime Minister is undertaking a visit to Brunei and to Singapore. He is traveling to Brunei at the invitation of His Majesty Sultan Haji Hassan Al Bolkiah, and the visit is scheduled for 3rd and 4th of September, and after that he will travel to Singapore at the invitation of His Excellency Mr. Lawrence Wong, the Prime Minister of Singapore. And that visit will be over 4th and 5th of September. This will be the first ever bilateral visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Brunei. On hydrocarbons, we have been importing hydrocarbons from Brunei, and in the long run we would like to have more predictable supplies, with longer term contracts from Brunei, especially in the area of gas, in which we see that India's demand for natural gas will increase many times in the near future. So that is an opportunity for the Brunei side to lock in long-term gas supply arrangements if they wish to do so.
All right, Professor Harsh Pant, Director of Studies and Head of the Strategic Studies Program at ORF, joins me along with Professor Chintamani Mahapatra, who is the founding chairperson of the Kalinga Institute of Indo-Pacific Studies. Thank you, gentlemen, for taking out the time and speaking to me on India Global. Essentially, there are three legs to this conversation that we will have today, which is about the trade ties, the strategic aspect of this visit, and of course specifically around energy and defense. And let's take that one by one. Professor Pant, starting with you, sir, in terms of this outreach, it comes at a time when if you connect the dots, it is essentially a larger engagement from a strategic point of view for the Indo-Pacific, for the ASEAN countries from New Delhi.
Thanks, Gaurie. I think, Gaurie, something very interesting is happening. For a very long time, and we have been saying that, we have been repeating it as a mantra that, look, ASEAN centrality is at the heart of India's Indo-Pacific outreach. And of course, it is. ASEAN is very, very critical in terms of India's Act East policy, India's, engagement vis-a-vis East and Southeast Asia. But what I think you are seeing now is somewhat of a disaggregation of India's ASEAN policy, that India is also now looking at individual countries in terms of their own bilateral relationship, in terms of their own heft in the region, and in terms of what they can deliver for India. So I think when you look at what India has done in the last few months, in fact, Vietnam, Malaysia, Philippines, now Brunei and Singapore, I think this is this was long overdue, because ASEAN itself is coming under significant strain because of the pressure of great power contestation. You have China's rise, you have disjointness within ASEAN itself. And now, as India looks at ASEAN and India looks at its own Act East policy, it has to recognize that not only ASEAN is critical, but I think looking at individual countries, mapping out the bilateral trajectories individually is also important. And therefore, these relationships are becoming so very critical, and India is putting in an extra bit of effort in sort of sharpening the edges. Of course, Singapore has been a long-time partner.
Yes.
But look at what we are doing with other countries, and that, I think, is the larger mapping of India's foreign policy in the region, which is quite significant.
Absolutely. Professor Mahapatra, you want to come in on that, and also weigh in on the fact that there is the other view as well, which is that New Delhi seems to be now playing catch up to some extent. Yes, we've been deepening our engagement, and as Professor Pant said, yes, in the last fortnight itself, we've played host to Vietnam, Malaysia, and of course building on this as well with Brunei and Singapore. But this comes at a time when China does have very deep trade and strategic interests and engagements with ASEAN countries. How do you see now New Delhi from here on? And some would say, is it now catching up with Beijing?
I don't think that we are catching up with China. I don't think that we are trying to compete with China as far as ASEAN is concerned. The Chinese have been involved in Southeast Asia for a longer time than India. Of course, we are not talking about history. During the Cold War time and the post-Cold War time, the Chinese, because of their financial capabilities and trade and investment interest, they were deeply involved in ASEAN countries. Relatively, we are a late comer. I see it in a different way. India is trying to enhance its footprints in ASEAN countries. We engage with ASEAN as an institution by signing free trade agreement. We have Indian ASEAN summits taking place almost every year now. But individually, maintaining ties with all the countries, big and small, is very, very important. We have
Indeed.
long relationship with Indonesia and Malaysia and Thailand and Philippines, but now Singapore and Brunei being smaller states, India is trying to also say that India is giving more importance to its relationship with even small states, which are otherwise critical, very, very important. So I look at it as India's part of Act East policy, India's Indo-Pacific strategy, and enhancing relationship with smaller countries with the same doctrine of Sagar, or security and growth for all.
Right. Now, let me come to the trade aspect of these relationships. Professor Pant, weigh in on that as far as the trade relationships, we have a very deep relationship with Singapore, but we are also building in with some of the other nations, Brunei being one.
Indeed, and I think you were showing this response of the Secretary East to one of the queries about hydrocarbons, etc. I think the recognition is that unless India leverages economic ties with the region, and the point that you were earlier posited to Professor Mahapatra, the fact that China is so important today is because of its economic linkages with the region. China is so integrated. Each member of ASEAN individually, as well as ASEAN as a group, is so integrated with China economically that now, it has almost become impossible to think of a strategic posture in the region without investing in the economic dimension. And therefore, for India, it is very critical that it engages seriously on the economic question. We know we are late. We know, I think India, is not part of, for example, economic relationships in the region like RCEP. We moved out.
Yes.
We walked out, and that has put us in a slightly more of a difficult position. So we need to build on our economic ties to have the strategic influence that we need in the region, because other countries want us to do that.
Professor Mahapatra, on the defense aspect of these ties and visits, how do you read that?
India and Singapore have very deep defense cooperation, including naval exercises. Brunei is also a defense partner for quite some time now. And India and Brunei have cooperation even in the space sector. And India, has begun to improve its defense and security cooperation more actively, more openly with many ASEAN member countries, particularly the Philippines and Vietnam, even offering to sell weapons. We have sold weapons, BrahMos missile to Philippines. The Vietnamese and the Indonesians are negotiating, and even Singapore and Brunei are very, very important defense partner. This relationship has to be improved further. Now, smaller countries like Singapore and Brunei are at the moment slightly getting into a dilemma because of the US-China competition and rivalry.
Yes.
A country like India with a growing profile and emerging global player, the smaller countries will feel more comfortable to build up ties with a country like India, which is not having any kind of rivalry with any country anyway. So I think this is very important that India is reaching out to these countries on defense and security matters, joint training, and even sharing of intelligence, holding exercises, etc.
Absolutely. I have to leave it there. Professor Pant, Professor Mahapatra, thanks so much for speaking to me on India Global. We're going to come back as Prime Minister Modi undertakes that visit starting tomorrow. On that note, a quick break. We come back and talk more on the other side.
People like to say,
it is what it is.
And that's true, until it isn't. Remember before AI when you couldn't do this?
Watch this video and list the authors she quoted.
Oh, that's smart. What else can it do?
Find me the top spots for tagine in Marrakesh and put them on a map.
Nice. Remember when all phones pretty much did the same stuff? Until they didn't. Google Pixel 9.
Great tasting coffee shouldn't cost a fortune. That's why McCafe coffees are made with 100% Arabica beans and fresh organic milk and start from only $1.39.
Mum and Dad love Bright Sun Travel. They book all their trips through them. Mum's business trips, fly drives or city breaks. I love beach holidays the best, and so does my dad.
For business, leisure or fun, call Bright Sun. Atoll protected.
When you're setting up a new nest, starting your own flock, or they just keep on growing. Get the flexibility you need with VeryPay. Pay now, pay later, or pay over 3 months and pay no interest. We'll even send you helpful payment reminders. Shop the online store for fashion, home and more. VeryPay. Ways to pay that work your way.
With Post Office Over 50s life cover, enjoy peace of mind knowing your family will receive a guaranteed payout when you're gone. UK resident 50 to 80, you're guaranteed acceptance. No health checks and from just £1.15 a week. Plus free 24/7 GP access with the health and wellbeing benefit. Purchase and receive a £125 gift card for amazon.co.uk, Tesco or M&S. Call Post Office on 0800 171 2211.
I'm starting to notice a trend in your stories and the way you talk about yourself. You expect to disappoint people, and then when you do a good job, like at work today, you don't let yourself enjoy it or accept any praise. You've come so far. Maybe it's time to start giving yourself some of the credit.
Aye.
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 Good
idea. It's never too early to consider my pension options.
With II's low flat pension fees, you could retire with more.
Really?
Helping you get the most out of your pension.
Nice. So many investment opportunities!
Interactive Investor, a which recommended SIP provider 3 years running. The II SIP, your personal pension.
By nature, that's just how the scenes were written. And then we really do have some quite...
Welcome back. You're watching India Global. I'm Gaurie Dwivedi. Now shifting focus to the latest in Iran-Pakistan relationship. It seems there's now more trouble brewing. Remember, earlier this year, Iran and Pakistan traded strikes and struck each other's assets in their territories. Since then, the relationship between the two has been tense. And add to it, there's been a regime change in Iran, and now the latest reason for tensions to spike between the two sides is regarding the gas pipeline. The long delayed gas pipeline, it now seems that Pakistan has not met its side of the commercial contract, and Iran is willing to escalate that further. How will that impact the Tehran-Islamabad relationship and its impact on New Delhi is our big debate on India Global. Let me first get in my colleague Mohammad Ghazali to fill us in with the latest as far as what the tussle is all about, and then we take this forward. Over to you, Ghazali.
So Iran and Pakistan signed this gas pipeline deal back in 2009, and after 2009, Iran claimed in 2011 that it had completed the side of the pipeline on its side, on its border, but Pakistan kept delaying it. And in 2014, Pakistan requested Iran that they want to extend the completion date by 10 years. That 10 years expires this month in September. And now before that, Iran has been reprimanding Pakistan to finish that gas pipeline, because Pakistan is heavily dependent on Iran for its gas supply. More than that, what is the conundrum for Pakistan right now? Iran faces global sanctions, and Pakistan perhaps expects that US will give them some sanction waiver to continue this gas pipeline. But the United States State Department earlier this year had clearly stated that anybody who engages with Iran on business terms, trade ties, they will face action from United States. And Pakistan, considering itself to be a close ally of United States, doesn't want to upset United States. But US has not given any indication that when it comes to completion of this pipeline, whether they will give Pakistan any kind of leverage to continue and finish this pipeline. And now the other dilemma for Pakistan is that Pakistan is also heavily dependent on Gulf states for its energy needs, and out of those Gulf states, Saudi Arabia is the leading state which provides Pakistan's energy needs. And Saudi Arabia is also not very comfortable with the fact that Pakistan, one of the Asian allies of Saudi Arabia in Asia, is dependent on Iran, or it will further its interest with Iran by constructing that pipeline. Pakistan also faces another problem, that is the International Arbitration Court, and Iran may drag Pakistan to the International Arbitration Court if it doesn't sort of meet the deadline for finishing this pipeline. So Pakistan has multiple problems right now. Its own economy is dipping. We know the problems there. And now Pakistan's Foreign Affairs Ministry has not hinted whether they have applied for any kind of waiver to the United States State Department when it comes to deal with Iran vis-a-vis this pipeline.
All right, Mohammad Ghazali, we leave it there. Appreciate you joining us to decode what the real dispute right now is between Iran and Pakistan. All right, Ambassador D.P. Srivastava, who's been Indian ambassador to the Islamic Republic of Iran, as well as Tara Kartha, who is former Director of National Security Council Secretariat, joins me on the broadcast to decode this further. Tara, let me come to you first, which is that from Pakistan's options point of view, it's between the deep sea and the devil, really, you know. But at the same time, how does this impact its relationship with Iran and its larger ramifications for the region? That's really the big issue here. Your first take.
See, it is obviously Iran is very clearly annoyed. I mean, it has very good reasons to be annoyed because it has built its section of the pipeline, right? It built it long back. Pakistan, from day one, has been hanging back. And the reasons for that are plenty. In fact, most of us, you remember it was initially supposed to be an Iran, Pakistan, India pipeline. And we knew that was never going to happen, right? Ek to the pricing was terrible. The fact that the Saudis would get very annoyed was clear. So Pakistan, for various reasons, right from the beginning, was very hesitant about this whole thing. Then came the sanctions. Then comes the fact that, they are. But the point here is they never asked the US for a waiver. To date, as far as I'm aware, which is from what the spokesman said in March, he said they have never asked us for a waiver. Okay, that is the second thing. Third thing is there is a very, very lucrative gas smuggling thing going on across the border. Everybody is making money. And that includes officials from the border guarding forces. It includes almost everybody.
So Iran is basically going to call out Pakistan's bluff, right? And how does that impact the relationship? That's the point. It now needs to be ready to face the music.
Yes, it has, because Iran has got an open and shut case. It has gone in full faith on this contract, so has Pakistan. They've signed on to it, and now you say force majeure, we can't. And in fact, as recent as February, I think the parliament had given sanction for that 80-kilometer pipeline. And now they said, no, we can't build it at all. Like I said, there are all these pressures on Pakistan. So it's going to create a huge problem between these two.
Right. And as far as the security calculus for the region, the instability between Pakistan, Iran, the fact that there is now a new regime in Iran, that complicates the security calculus for New Delhi. Break that down for us.
We have a waiver, right, for Chabahar in terms of dealing with Iran, but that is only for Afghanistan. In terms of getting...
No, I'm not talking about the waiver. I'm talking about the fact that an Islamabad-Tehran relationship reaching another low after what happened earlier in January impacts the entire region, creates more instability in the region.
Well, that area was always unstable. I mean, the Jaish-ul-Adl has been operating from Pakistan for years. And we also know that many of them were being backed by states whom I will not mention here. So that is already a given. The airstrikes happened, which was very unusual for Iran to do such a thing to a brotherly Islamic state, all that stuff. I mean, this was an IRGC decision. How is this going to get worse? How does it impact the region? I don't see it going into some kind of a war-like situation, but I would imagine that the non-state assets would be further, used, because Pakistan accuses Iran of sheltering Baloch. You just had that huge, massive Baloch protests. How did that happen? It's obviously these are operating from Iranian soil. So all that we can expect that will go up, because Iran is has a lot going on this deal. So if they back off now, those assets could be used further. So Iran uses its assets, Pakistan uses its assets. So yeah, we are looking at a very troubled future ahead. And plus the money which Pakistan has to pay. That's going to be...
Let me ask that to Ambassador Srivastava as well. Sir, how do you read the situation and the security calculus, how it's likely to change given these developments?
The security situation is linked to internal situation within Balochistan, where Pakistan has conducted 5 military operations since inception. And the situation has become worse with the Chinese coming in. And this has naturally resulted in a lot of resentment. The CPEC project is not bringing jobs to Balochistan. It is generating jobs and economic growth in other parts of Pakistan where industry will be set up. The pipeline issue, of course, has been there since 2013, and it must be remembered that there was a 2-year interim between 2016 and 2018 when there were no sanctions. So if Pakistan was sincere about building the pipeline, it had enough time to complete the project. It cannot at this stage get out of its international commitment. These oil Iran has already sunk more than $1 billion in completing pipeline on its side of the border. And naturally, they would expect that Pakistan keeps to its international commitment.
Right. And the fact that Iran is set to take Pakistan to court because it is not fulfilling its side of these commercial contractual obligations, how do you read that impacting the relationship between the two? Do you see that souring significantly and its larger ramifications?
I'm not sure that Iran will actually go to that limit. They have raised this issue, but we have to bear in mind that there's a limit to their patience. And take or pay clause, this is a standard clause in all international oil and gas contracts. In this particular case, it goes beyond technicalities. Iranians also suspect that it's not simply the US pressure, but also the inclination of the Sharif government, which is closer to Saudi Arabia. And this probably is the reason why Pakistan did not go forward with the project even during the 2-year interregnum when there were no US sanctions.
All right, Ambassador Srivastava, Kartha, appreciate both of you joining me on India Global. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of this show. Thanks so much for watching.